Hello, you beautiful, sexy, outstanding people. This is Zach Couples from ZachCouples.com, and I'm bringing you another movement conversation with my good friend, the legend himself, quote board extraordinaire, straight out of Arkansas. What? The Dolph, Randy Bowling. And say hi to the people, Randy.
Hey, my name's Randy.
And the reason why I wanted to bring Randy on for this movement conversation is because Randy is incredibly experienced at being a travel PT, and he knows a lot of the ins and outs on travel PT, and he also he's into some shit with some psychology shit. So I kind of wanted to pick his brain on that. So those are kind of the two topics for today, and I couldn't find a better guy than Randy. And also, Randy's my bro, and bros be talking about all types of things, so who knows where this is going to go. As for all these movement conversations, I kind of gave you the agenda, but I don't have specific questions. I never gave Randy anything in advance. We're just going to go off the top of the dome, like some good freestyling back in the day. I think hip-hop circa 1994, maybe some Big L shit, who knows, but neither here nor there. Randy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, man?
I'm a physical therapist, graduated from the University of Central Arkansas in 2008, started traveling in October that year, and meant to do it for 2 to 5 years, and now it's been 9.
Man, he's almost on the 10. He's almost on the decade level for this travel stuff. So
I should have rounded up. That would have sounded better.
That's all right. So why did you decide to go into traveling? Like, what was your impetus, especially coming out of school?
Well, 2 reasons. One, I wanted to see the country a little bit, and the second, I wanted to pay off my loans. So I wanted to make a little more money, see the country, and it's worked.
Did you have any other possible options that you were exploring before?
I did not. I just
No, so
started.
you just-
I knew a traveler, or one of my buddies from the year ahead of me had traveled and got me in touch with his company. So I pretty much started from.
Okay, nice. All right. And so, like, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about all the spots that you've been?
Okay. First job was in Big Spring, Texas. Then I went to Hobbs, New Mexico, Ruidoso, New Mexico, Tillamook, Oregon, Carthage, Missouri, South Hill, Virginia, Roma, Texas, a couple other small towns in Texas for that same assignment. Then back to New Mexico, in Belen this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in Arizona. Seems like there's 1 or 2 more. Idaho, worked in Idaho.
Right. World traveler, or at least U.S. traveler.
Yes.
And now Page America.
Page America.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, like, when you're picking all these places, and obviously you've been kind of all over the place. What is your criteria when you are? Why don't you kind of just talk about the process of when you are selecting a spot that you want to be, and maybe discuss a little bit about what that looks like when you're interacting with the company.
Okay. Now what I look for small town hospital-based outpatient clinics. And I'm assuming most of your listeners probably are more geared towards outpatient. So if you want good jobs that give you plenty of time with patients and kind of let you have freedom to do what you want to do, small town hospitals are the way to go. As long as you don't mind being lonely sometimes. Small towns, you're going to be by yourself a lot, watching movies, eating by yourself.
Yeah. Unless you're in Page America, then they're just going to do all types of fun stuff.
Exactly.
Page is a great spot. So then what led you to, because it sounds like that wasn't always what you were searching for in a travel gig. So, like, what were you searching for before?
When I first started, I just wanted outpatient. But I
Okay.
took a couple of privately owned clinic jobs, and those were not so great. So now I try to stick to hospital jobs.
Gotcha. But still working the outpatient side of things.
Yes, I've worked home health and some acute care, but prefer outpatient.
Why do you prefer outpatient? I don't think I've ever asked you this.
Well, I like outpatient because if they don't want to see you, they just don't show up.
Keeping it real, Dolph.
In acute care, you have to go stick your head in the door even if they don't want you to be there. So.
Yeah, very much so. So it gives you a little bit more freedom, and I mean the people who are going to come want to be there.
Well, home health is nice too because they're usually excited to see you come. So it has some perks too. But
gotcha. So then, have you always worked with the same company then?
I've worked for 2 different companies. RES and Delta healthcare providers.
Okay. So why don't you go ahead and then just talk to us about what was your first interactions like when you were interacting with some of these companies? What led you to switching? Like, what are you looking for when it comes to finding a good company?
Initially, I didn't really care about insurance because I didn't have any health issues. So I just was primarily looking for somebody that could get me a job in either an area I wanted or a job that I thought would be cool
Mm-hmm.
and pay. That's the reason I switched the first time. So I found out, hey, they could be paying me more, should be paying me more. So I switched, and the company I was with said, hey, we can't match that. But
Mm.
eventually I switched back to them.
Okay. So wait, you were with the one, then you switched, and then you came back to the
Yes.
other one.
Yes.
Okay. Nice. And what were some of the conversations like that you had with these companies when you were kind of switching back and forth?
Basically, I explained to the recruiter I had at the time, this is the job they have, this is how much they can pay. And she said, well, let me see what we can do. And she said, we can do this much. And it wasn't quite enough for me to stay with them, so I switched the first time.
Gotcha. So you used a little bit of some negotiation tactics,
Yes, and I'm terrible at
some
negotiating,
competition.
but you should always do that. You should talk to two or three, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah, very much so. When you first started out, were there any, I mean, obviously, because you've done this for almost 10 years now, like what were some of things that if you could go back in time and tell yourself, hey, you need to know this, and this when you travel, like what would those things be?
The main thing for me is I would tell myself that I should have negotiated more earlier on.
Okay,
And I wouldn't have taken those private clinic jobs.
gotcha, gotcha. Let's talk a little bit more about the negotiation side of things, Randy. In terms of things that you may have negotiated now, or like in terms of your contract structure, is there anything that like you would have done differently, knowing what you know now back then?
Well, the thing that led me to the biggest amount of change that I saw in pay was talking to other therapists. And as a traveler, sometimes you're on a job and you're the only traveler, so you can't talk to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do find yourself in a position where there are 3 or 4 other travelers, you get to be good friends with them, start talking to them about money. They're usually pretty cool about telling you what they're making. And then you can find out, am I where I should be, a little less, or am I doing okay here?
Yeah.
Also, your bosses sometimes will tell you.
Mm-hmm.
If you get to be good enough friends with them, they'll kind of tell you what the pay rate is. And if you know that, then that kind of gives you an idea of what could be out there that you're not getting.
Gotcha. So basically, you should probably be a good dude and hang out with your peeps and
Yes.
you know and this is one of the reasons why I want this conversation with you is because you've done this so much longer that you know how some of these ins and outs in this field work in travel PT. Now, what about in terms of like the specifics of contracts? So why don't we go ahead and let's talk a little bit about that. Now, I know early in your career you elected to have them find your housing. So for those of you people who don't know, with Travel PT, you have a few options in terms of how you can structure your contract with people. It's not just the total lump sum of things. Or some other benefits you could potentially have or not have. And so you've been on both sides of that coin. Why don't you go ahead and talk to us a little bit about stipends versus
Okay.
having the companies search for your housing?
Usually, if the company searches for housing, they'll put you in a nicer place. Well, they'll definitely put me in a nicer place than I would find for myself sometimes, because they want to keep you working for them, and they will make sure you have a place that's ready for you. They'll cover internet, cable, issues like that. It's less of a hassle that way. You can just show up and it's usually ready to go. Sometimes there might be a day or two delay. If they can't find something furnished, then they'll furnish it for you, and it's simpler.
Mm-hmm.
You don't take home quite as much money, but it's also much easier just to show up, move into the place, and you don't have to set anything up, worry about really negotiating anything as far as rent goes.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So it has its perks.
So, like, how much of a difference would you say there is in terms of take-home pay? And mind you, people, that the stipends that you get for traveling are tax-free. So your gross to take-home is very, very similar. There's a slight difference in terms of taxes just based on your hourly pay, depending on how you structure your contract. versus the situation that Randy's talking about, which you find your housing. And I mean, you don't have to give specific numbers, but I
Right.
mean, like, what would you say?
I think initially the first time I switched, they paid me $10 more an hour. I think that was tax free. Uh, but since then, we've made some different changes, and I started getting a bigger chunk of that tax free.
Gotcha. So then, and then you're saying that that's in terms of just like some of the negotiation stuff you've done, or
It's it kind of evolves when you're with a company for a little while. You'll find yourself either staying the same, slowly losing a little money, and sometimes it works the other way too, where you take a job that pays you a little more, and just based on kind of how that works, they know you're not going to want to take much less than that, so they try to find you something close to that.
gotcha.
But I've had a couple of years, it seemed like, where I slowly kind of started, each assignment seemed like I was losing a little, losing a little.
Why do you think that is?
Because I'm not a good negotiator.
Way to take ownership, Dolph.
Hey, I've learned a little something from living with you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? It's not me, man. It's Jocko Willink. Discipline equals freedom. Hashtag. So, what in terms of the assignments that you have taken, because obviously you've done a bunch, and we know that outpatient's kind of your forte. When you're with the interview process with a company that you could potentially be working at, and not the travel company, but the clinic itself, I should have been more specific. What kind of questions are you asking these people? And, you know, in terms of, because obviously you've had some not so great experiences too, like where did you err at on those potential avenues?
I think it's just I ignored the signs. Like I knew they probably weren't going to be the best jobs, and I just took them anyways.
So what signs did you see
Well,
before you even went there?
usually they will be pretty upfront with you and tell you about how busy or not busy you're going to be. So if you like how many patients am I going to see in a day and how much time will I have with them, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And earlier on, sometimes I took jobs just because I maybe wanted to go somewhere, for other reasons. And then you get a job and you're seeing 3 or 4 people at a time and you're just miserable.
Yeah. So there's a lot of times with some of the selection in these jobs, there's kind of a trade-off between location versus pay versus quality of care that you could potentially give or not.
That's correct.
That's pretty correct? In terms of now we know in outpatient, it seems like rural areas, you generally can get a little bit more, better quality of care, more time with patients, all that. With the home health and other jobs that you've worked that weren't outpatient, would you say that that was the same as well, or?
I've only taken one job that was strictly home health and one job that was strictly acute care. Most of my other jobs have been sort of a combination, like here in Page, a little bit of acute care, a little bit of outpatient, or strictly outpatient.
Gotcha. So was the home health also rural area?
Yeah, it was. It was Tillamook, Oregon.
Okay.
It was a very good setup for home health. They only expect, I think, a full day was 5 patients a day. The only bad thing was I had to fill out the OASIS. So if you take home health, you should try to negotiate that you don't have to do the OASIS because that's just.
You can negotiate that?
I think my buddy did. He's not as a traveler, just as doing PR and work in Texas.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I thought the OASIS was like a mandatory thing that you have to do.
Well, the nurse that admits that you can,
that's right,
can do that. So if it's somebody that's just coming off of a total hip or a total knee, and they don't really need nursing care, then they may say, hey, PT can see them, or if it's just generalized weakness coming out from the hospital, they may say nursing doesn't need to be involved. But since it's a home health situation, the nurse can go in and do the admit.
Yeah, that one's the worst. I've seen. I was in home health for one patient, and the reason why it was only one patient was because they didn't put anyone on my schedule after that, and I'm like, well, this is silly. Why am I doing this job? And I quit, and they were upset that I quit. I don't know, and maybe there was poor communication or something like that, but yeah, it was bizarre. But that's interesting. I didn't know you could negotiate that. So, like, in your experience and with some of the people that you've met who are travelers, have you had any other things that they've negotiated or that you've negotiated that maybe is not salary or money related, but related with other things? And can you negotiate with the places you work?
You can negotiate sometimes with the traveling companies and get continuing education money.
Hmm.
Or if you're going to extend an assignment, you can say, I'll extend, but I need this much time off, and maybe negotiate something for getting something paid for. Back to home health, some of my buddies not travelers would get paid more for an eval
Hmm.
compared to a regular visit. Same thing with the Oasis. I think you could get paid a little more. Like, I'll do the Oasis, but you need to pay me more for that visit because it's going to be much more time consuming.
Nice. So have you negotiated for some of those things on yourself,
I'm
or
not.
that's just kind of what you've heard other people do?
Yes.
Gotcha. So then, that's interesting. On the con ed side of things, or no, I take that back. On the more days off side of things, obviously we're very #blessed in Page America,
Yes.
where we can kind of take off as much time or as little time as
Right.
we need because Kai is awesome.
Yes, she is.
Kai Scott, I'm going to have her on here at one of these points.
You should.
I should, because she's got some good stuff. But do you feel like other clinics that you've worked at or other places have that same flexibility?
Not quite as much flexibility as we have here, because she will pretty much let you off whenever you want. If I know that I'm going to need time off, I just put it in the contract. And I generally don't like to take days off unless something comes up. So if I know I need to leave or go home and visit family or go home and take care of things, then I'll try to write it up into the contract where I have this week off or these 2 days here.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever done it where, like, you can get, hey, I just have 2 weeks of flexible, I can take this off whenever?
I'm not.
Okay. I think some people have done that
You probably could.
in the past. I mean, the big crux of this, you beautiful, sexy people, is that you have a lot of wiggle room in terms of your negotiations with things. And that's not just travel PT, but that's all PT jobs. So don't be afraid to ask for what you want and what you need in order to be successful. Any other traveling pearls, or like any other things that you wish you would have known going into this?
Just don't take a job if it doesn't sound good to you. Don't feel the pressure to take a job because there's always going to be more.
Yeah.
So don't, and it's the worst case scenario, just take a few extra weeks off. You know?
Gotcha. Now, we're going to get a little bit deep in this, man. But you had mentioned that there's a lot of times where when you're working rural areas or when you're not, maybe you're the only therapist around, that it can get lonely. Is probably, maybe that's not the word, but you get a lot of alone time. Like, how do you recommend someone who's in that potential scenario deal with it? Like, what do you do to make sure you don't go crazy?
Well, it usually doesn't bother me because I'll just go to the movies and watch a movie by myself or go eat out by myself. But there are certain people that don't handle being alone very well. You should still travel or at least give it a shot, but you may do 2 or 3 assignments and decide it's not for you.
Yeah. Or maybe you just go to a location where there's people.
Yeah, but even when you are at a location where there's people, you're still in a new place by yourself.
Yeah.
And not everybody is great about going out, making friends, and that sort of thing. So some people don't handle the isolation well.
Yeah.
Or miss family, miss friends.
Yeah. You plan on sticking around this travel gig for a minute?
I said 2 to 5 years, and I should at least get to 10, right?
At least. What keeps you going?
That feeling of knowing there's someplace else to see I haven't been.
Yeah. So you're quite the adventurer then.
I try to be.
Dolph and I go on some cray hikes, fam. So that's one of the added benefits about being a traveler is you can see a lot of cool places, cool things, and meet cool people. Any other travel recommendations, suggestions that you can think of? Because if not, we'll move on.
I think we've done a pretty decent job of going over it.
I think you killed it, man. You absolutely killed it. Well, let's talk a little bit about your psych stuff, because that's something that I am not as into. Well, I mean, I am, but I'm not to the extent that you are, or maybe the lens that you're at. So, like, you got a little, you kind of be digging that psychology kind of fare. So, what got you into that?
I'm trying to think exactly when I first really got into that. It might have been when I went to the first San Diego Pain Summit. there was a guy named Eric Kruger that gave a presentation, and he was, I think, in school at the University of New Mexico working with a guy by the name of Kevin Vowles, and he gave a really good presentation. I didn't know who he was, didn't know anything about him, but one of the presentations stood out to me, and it was more from a kind of a, how do you approach people from a psychological standpoint? And so that got me into reading a few more things. And then you realize that sometimes you might be doing somebody a disservice if your primary objective is just to eliminate their pain. If you're focused only on their pain, they may never get better, they may never get back to actually living life. And it kind of frees you up a little bit when you know, I don't have to change the pain before I get them doing something.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So then what was the crux of the talk? That, like, what was the light bulb thing for you during that talk that made you switch to the shift of focus on, I hate to say function, but function and purpose and movement versus focus on pain?
I don't know if just the talk did that. It was just the other stuff that I read and books that I found, and
Gotcha.
realizing that at a certain point, sometimes with people with chronic pain, another test, finding something that's wrong with them, isn't really going to help them. But if you can get them to realize that they can begin to do some of the things that they're either afraid to do or just haven't done because they quit doing it 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and it hasn't even entered into their head that it's a possibility for them. And it doesn't mean that you tell them their pain is unimportant or that it's just imagined or any of those things. That there's some things that are tossed out that come across the wrong way to people. But if I can get you to do an hour of something that before you could only do for 20 minutes and your pain's still the same level, you got better even though your pain didn't improve. Mm-hmm. If you can play with your grandkids, you still have the same level of pain that you had just sitting on the couch. And I guess it goes back even farther than that talk by Eric Kruger. I bought this book, Clinical Reasoning for the Manual Therapist. And there was something written by Louis Gifford. And after...
Rest in peace.
Yes. I had 2 patients around that time after I read the little essay that he had in there. And one of them was a school teacher who felt guilty because she was overweight, was so scared to do things, told me she was scared to go shopping, scared to clean her house. And I just told her, I just said, hey, it's okay to go shopping. Go shop. She's like, I'm going to get mad at you if I have pain. I'm like, go shopping, you can get mad at me. She went shopping. She was happy. And she did fairly well. And then a couple months later, I was on a new job, and there was a lady. She wasn't my patient. She was low 40s, probably 41. And I just saw her for one visit after somebody else had started with her. Didn't get to work with her again after that. But she started listing off all the stuff she didn't do anymore. And she said, I don't even bend over to tie my own shoes anymore. And so I just kind of asked her, I said, hey, did that help you? And she said, no, it didn't. And I said, well, maybe you should start doing some of those things. Kind of forgot about her. Didn't think too much about it. A couple weeks later, walked by her when she was working with the other therapist, and she said, hey, that helped me more than anything else.
Wow.
So those were the things that kind of probably got me thinking along those lines.
So then what were you like before that? Before Louis Gifford, rest in peace, changed your life?
Well, sometimes you're a little scared of the pain for them, not just them being scared of it. You think you're doing something wrong if they hurt. Mm-hmm. And you can be, but not always. Sometimes you have pain, you've had it for a while. Getting back to life, just doing general activities around your house and just living life, having fun with friends and family, sometimes is not going to be the most comfortable. But if you remove yourself from life, you don't get better. Your pain rarely improves because you start staying at home and not hanging out with friends and family, not going bowling, not playing basketball, lifting weights, doing all the things you used to do that were fun for you.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can get your people to understand that pain and tissue damage aren't the same thing, it's groundbreaking. It's groundbreaking for a lot of people, and it's unfortunate. I mean, this was true when I was in PT school, and I'm sure because you're so much older than I am, that it's true when you were in PT school, but they don't really teach you about, like, they don't teach you that concept.
No, and it's been around for a while.
Yeah,
Like
it has.
they could have taught us
I
even
think
way
it
back
was
when
definitely
when
pain fibers. I'd never heard of nociception in PT school, not once.
seems like they might have mentioned it. But
Yeah, maybe it's central. At CA they were a little bit more on the uppity up in that regard. Not that St. Ambrose wasn't. I thought they had a wonderful manual therapy program, and I learned a lot of good things. Don't get angry. And actually, Adrian Lowe was there, but he didn't really speak as much when I was there as he
oh,
did
okay.
now. So I feel cheated. No, just kidding. Um, so then, what in terms of some of the resources you had mentioned after you heard Eric Kruger talk and after you got some exposure to Mr. Gifford, what were some of like your other like what are your top three resources that were most salient for you in terms of that?
I think you can't go wrong with Fordyce's approach to or behavioral approach to pain and illness. Uh, it's a really good
You
read.
got to say the one story in that where the guy
Oh, in
was
the intro,
yeah because that still sticks out with me a little bit.
yeah, that's so Fordyce was going to treat this patient in a acute care setting, and before he went in to see them, he had a consultation with the doctors and the other medical providers that were going to go in, and he said, anytime this guy mentions his pain, we're just going to look out the window because he wouldn't get up out of bed, wouldn't do anything. So he's like, every time he brings up pain, we're just going to ignore him, turn, look out the window. So they did that a few times, and the guy catches on pretty quickly because it's obvious, and it's like, I know what you guys are doing, but it still didn't matter. He started getting dressed and getting out of bed. So that hooked me on that book.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how much like that you can develop cognitive associations with that can perpetuate pain. And maybe it's I am feeling this, and therefore when I see you doing this activity, it reinforces that response. It's Pavlov's dogs essentially. It's the same thing. So that type of conditioning is still relevant in pain, and it's one of the factors that it's a potential cause that leads to chronic pain, which I'm going to be talking about in my talk. Just a heads up. What are the other couple books?
The one, pain-related fear
Mm-hmm.
that I'm reading now. You want to get it?
No,
Get
you
those
don't
two
have to
books
get
and
it.
hold them up?
No, don't worry about that. I'll link them in the show notes.
Okay.
But so what are you getting out of that?
I'll let you know when I finish.
You mean you don't have any insights now, fam? I mean, you're about halfway through, aren't you?
Well, one of the things that I thought that I may have to start, and I sort of started the process with the lady today, they had people rank activities based on how much fear they had to do them. And it was fear of harm, not fear of pain. Because it's hard to have somebody disprove that it causes pain. But if you set them up and they think that they're going to become paralyzed or that their back's going to fall into or something, then you can set up an experiment, have them try the activity. Even if it hurts, they're like, oh, I'm okay.
That's interesting. So really, like this book, and it sounds like some of the approaches that you're mentioning are not necessarily geared at addressing the pain component of, uh, of chronic pain or something like that, or persistent pain, but it would be addressing all of the other factors that could potentially perpetuate that, be it fear, be it anxiety, be it whatever. Is that
Yes.
pretty accurate? So when you're approaching a patient, you're trying to address a lot of those other areas at hopes that I can reduce the threat of pain, which is in the central focus. Is that
Yeah, and if
accurate?
you, pretty much, yeah. If you take somebody that's really fearful, really anxious, and you get them to do something, then they get to see that the bad negative result they were so concerned about didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's much more likely to create a long-term change than you just telling them that, hey, you can go pick up that 50-pound kettlebell.
Mm-hmm.
But if they go do it and they're expecting something catastrophic to happen and it doesn't, then they've just learned, hey, not as fragile as I thought it was.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. That's awesome. So then, how do you handle a situation where you have them try the activity in question and they do get a negative result? Maybe not paralysis or something like that, but maybe their fear matches the result that happened. How do you navigate that type of scenario?
It's tricky. You either try to figure out another way to show them that they're still okay, that they can do something. Or you may have to just say, hey, I started you out a little too far. Let's back off a little bit, reapproach it again, start you with a lighter load, start you with a different task, and just say, hey, that was my fault. Take ownership.
Love it. So essentially, you're still trying to keep the movement in question as a focus of the treatment, but maybe you're changing something contextually or something that reduces the potential of getting into that situation or that scenario, whether that's load, whether that's positioning, whether that's body mechanics, whether that's...
Yeah, you can take them out of the position. If standing and bending hurts, get them quadruped, have them bend. Let them see that, hey, my back can bend. Maybe bending while I'm putting all my weight on it right now is a little painful, is a little too sensitive, something I'm not ready to tolerate yet, but get them to do the activity, figure out a way, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes people just aren't going to get better.
That's very true. That's a hard thing to swallow, that you're not going to get everyone better, but it sometimes happens, very much so. Yeah, makes me think a lot of like just many of the patients who I've worked with over my experiences where it just wasn't happening, and for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, it's extremely frustrating.
Yes,
but it's going to happen.
It's going to happen, but it doesn't mean you can't be. You need to be satisfied. You got to keep getting better. That's the key.
Yeah.
What's book number 3?
I don't know that I have anything right. Oh, Aches and Pains by Louis Gifford.
Nice plug. Nice plug. So what is it? Because I know you love Louis.
I do. Yeah.
He's your boy.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I tell you what, I like his books. I read Aches and Pains Volume 1, and I thought it was phenomenal. And I look forward to reading the ones that you got me. So thank you for that again.
Quite welcome.
No tears today. What is it about his messages that resonates with you so much?
I think it's that he got them to do stuff, and he didn't spend a whole lot of time explaining things in detail. I think maybe I'm misinterpreting what I read, but just letting them know that it's okay to try things and giving people permission to do things.
So he didn't discuss ion channels much?
I don't believe so. Maybe he did. I'll have to read it again.
Well, you know what, though? It's like, I think when we first dive into some of this pain science stuff, that you go all in and you're talking about the brain and the anterior cingulate cortex and the ion channels and the emergent properties of bioplastic blah 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 blah. And although there is some research suggesting that if you incorporate neuroscience into your explanations, regardless of accuracy, you actually are a little bit more believable and more credible. But sometimes having a simple explanation is much more warranted, and you don't have to go that in depth into some of these things.
Well, I mean, the patients need you to have a basic understanding of that, but I don't know that they need to know that, because my eyes would gloss over if somebody started talking about that to me. But if you can just tell them and get them to understand however you need to do it, that it's okay to move, it's okay to try this. I had a guy not too long ago that after his back surgery in 2010 didn't lift legs ever again until a couple weeks ago, and all he had done was run. And when I told him it was okay to do some squats with a kettlebell, some goblet squats or some deadlifts, he was really excited and happy about life and knew that he could go out and try something again.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what's that conversation like when you're so you got someone who's afraid of, let's take this case, afraid of lifting something up or squatting, and it sounds as though maybe you're not going with the ion channel talk. So what is the talk like?
Well, with him, I mean, he came in not for his low back, he came in for his neck pain. Well, his neck was getting better, so then he automatically, because something had improved, he's more willing to listen to me. So when I say, hey, since your back's, why don't we work on that a little bit? And then if you can, I know some people hate manual therapy, but if you can find something that feels good, why not spend a little bit of your time doing something that feels good and then get them to do your exercise, or vice versa, exercise and then do something that feels good. So we had found a few things that actually felt good to him that gave him a little bit of pain relief. So then when I'm like, hey, let's try to do this goblet squat, and he's like, I haven't worked my legs in a long time, and I'm telling him it's been 7 years, I promise you, you can handle it, he's willing to try it. So it just depends on every patient. It's different with every patient.
For sure. So it sounds like the biggest thing is just getting buy-in. Buy-in and building the relationship with the patient and that trust, so then you can test the waters if they're potentially threatening or to that individual.
Right. And yeah, if you can get them to buy in, and just get them to try it. A lot of time, if you can just, even if they don't completely buy into it, if they're willing to give it a shot, if they'll try something, and then you hope you don't pick something that's too heavy or pick the wrong activity that just really flares their pain up, because then they're not going to trust you again. Well, they might.
I don't know, man. When you got that wonderful Southern accent, though.
It helps when you sound like Joel Osteen.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'll put him in the show notes. Awesome, man. So where are you headed next?
I'm going to stay working for Kai and go to Susanville, California after a 3-week break.
Yeah. It's exciting. Any big plans for your 3-week break?
I'm going to take Mom on a road trip back home to Arkansas.
Nice.
She's flying out next weekend.
Nice. That'll be good. Another nice benefit to being a travel PT is when you get to the point you can take a lot of time off.
Yes.
Which is really, really cool. Where is the learning brigade taking you right now? Like what direction are you taking your continuing education from here on out, would you say?
You mean what classes am I going to take, or what books am I going to read?
But it doesn't have to be specific. Just like, what do you need to get better at?
I really want to get better at medical screening, just making sure that I'm not missing stuff that I should send to another provider. And I would like to refine my evaluation skills a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think I want to head back there and dive more into strength and conditioning stuff as a review, instead of just going on what I've learned from doing it myself over the years. Probably good to actually read some stuff. Oh,
for sure. I'll tell you what, if there's one thing that PTs don't read enough of, and that's not just outpatient, but that's anyone, because a lot of these principles are important, is the S&C side of things. Because they don't teach you how to squat, deadlift, or do many of these things.
Some people are doing rowing with yellow TheraBand with like a 30-year-old patient.
Yeah. Homie, don't play that. We lift heavy things in Page America, just an FYI. Awesome, man. So, Dolph, you've been outstanding. Thank you so much for being on this interview.
Yeah, of course.
Where can people find you?
Find me?
On the interwebs. I mean, I don't want to come knocking down your door.
Because I can give them the address here in Page.
No, because then they're going to be at my... No, just kidding. Although I wouldn't mind peeps coming out here. We're going to do all types of cool things.
I'm Instagram and Facebook. Okay. Just my name, Randolph Bowling.
Randolph Bowling? Straight through?
Straight through.
No caps, no underscores, nothing like that? All right.
It's a perk of having a name like Randolph.
Very true. It's a very rare but a wonderful name. Although I think like we might have to incorporate going into like Dolph's.
We could.
The Dolph side of things.
We might have to work in the Dolph. It's growing on me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I will put your Twitter and your Instagram, and you want Facebook too?
Yeah, you can do that. It's fine.
Okay. I'll put all that social media jazz in the show notes. Check this cat out. He's good people, and that's why I have him on here. So with that, thank you guys so much for listening in to us. If you want to learn more, check us out, ZachCouples.com. Sign up for the newsletter, because you're going to get access to the talks I'm going to be giving in the land of China and a bunch of other cool things. Otherwise, you people, stay classy, keep it real, but not to the extent where things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving. And I'll see you next time. Deuces.